What was Alexander the Great's native language? It's actually more confusing than you'd think. In some ways it's simple. Alexander was from Macedon, so he grew up speaking Macedonian. But the problem is we don't even really know what Macedonian was. Like, there's a modern language called Macedonian, but that's a Slavic language from a migration that happened almost 1,000 years after Alexander was alive. So his native language was almost certainly not a Slavic language like Russian or Polish or modern Macedonian. Macedon was an ancient kingdom located to the north of the classic Greek city-states like Athens, Thebes, or Sparta. And actually parts of it were located in modern-day Greece. And although it was culturally distinct from the states to the south, it was still pretty Greek. For instance, they worshipped many of the same gods, and at least the royalty was familiar with the Attic Greek of like Athens. So one thing everybody can agree on is that the Macedonian language was related to Greek. So the real question is, how far back did it split off from varieties like Attic Greek? Some scholars argue that ancient Macedonian was a Northwest Greek dialect. At the time, Greek wasn't really a centralized language, so dialects could be pretty different, but if it was a dialect like Doric or Ionic, it would be relatively mutually intelligible with the other varieties. A 1986 discovery of a tablet called the Pella Curse Tablet seems to support this theory. It's from Macedonia, and it's written in what looks like Doric Greek, but with some unique features that suggest that maybe it was an indigenous dialect as opposed to having been brought there. But there's other evidence that kind of points us in a different direction. Basically, some Greek authors wrote about Macedonian at the time and said things like, Macedonians say this instead of this. And what's interesting is that a lot of the Macedonian words would have B's, D's, and G's instead of aspirated consonants like P, T, and K. And that's weird because Greek's aspirated consonants originally were voiced like B's, D's, and G's. But the sound change that led to the aspirates happened way before the Greek dialects split off from each other. So that would imply that it's related to Greek, but less so than the other dialects. However, the glosses weren't always super consistent with this voicing pattern, so it's hard to know where to go with that. My personal theory is that Alexander grew up speaking a really old, conservative Greek dialect that was kind of hard to understand for other people, but it's not unreasonable to call it Greek, even if it might have been relatively more distinct than the other dialects.